I'm very excited to talk with you, Layla. I've gotten to see you perform maybe 3 or 4 times in different settings, but we actually have not really met or talked officially, I think. But I know you've got some fans here, and before we chat, would you want to start us off with some music?
Yeah, so there's a song, I have my banjo in my hand at the ready because there's a song that I play almost every single set. It's like an anchor for me. Like it's really grounding, I guess, in a more spiritual way and physically. And it's a song that I love so much. It was written in the 1950s by a Haitian guitarist named Franz Cassius, who was actually one of the mentors of Marc Ribot. I don't know if you're familiar with Marc's work, but
Nice.
there's secret Haitian influences everywhere. And I'm very keen on exploring those and sharing them. And he wrote this song, it's called Merci Bon Dieu. And it's a beautiful song, so I hope you enjoy it. The song is Merci Bon Dieu means thank you, Lord. And the words are saying, the rain is falling and the corn is growing and all the children are eating, so let's dance. Our Father up in heaven says our misery is over. Merci bon Dieu, gardez comment la misère finit pour nous. Merci bon Dieu, gardez comment la misère finit pour nous. Merci bon Dieu, gardez tout ça de tout côté pour nous. Merci bon Dieu, gardez comment la misère finit pour nous. La pluie tombée, la vie poussée, tout le monde qui gango aller manger. On nous danse Congo, on nous danse pétro. Papa bon Dieu dit dans le ciel la misère finie. Papa bon Dieu dit dans le ciel la misère finie pour nous. Merci bon Dieu, gardez comment la misère finit pour nous. Merci bon Dieu, gardez comment la misère finit pour nous. Merci bon Dieu, gardez tout ça dans notre côté pour nous. Merci bon Dieu, gardez comment la misère finit pour nous. La pluie tombée, la vie poussée, tout le monde qui gango pralé manger. On nous danse Congo, on nous danse pétro. Papa bon Dieu dit dans le ciel la misère finie. Papa bon Dieu dit dans le ciel la misère finie pour nous. Misère finie, misère finie, misère finie. Misère finie.
Yeah. Merci. Thank you. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
thank you. Thanks.
So, I mean, I guess my first obvious question as a fellow cellist and kind of understanding some of your background as a cello player, like how do you go from studying cello at NYU to playing Haitian songs on the banjo? Like what was that what was, one or more of those transformative moments that kind of kicked you in this direction?
Well, actually, one of the most transformative moments of my life was when I met a cellist named Rufus Cappadocia,
Awesome. I love Rufus.
um, playing with a Haitian roots music group called The Voodoo Drums of Haiti.
Okay.
And, you know, when I kind of look back on how I started playing banjo and, you know, at my musical path, I think that it was just like an undeniable moment for me of recognizing that I could do more with the cello and connecting with the idea that I had more to say with my music than anything I could learn at school, which is like the double-edged sword of school, because there's certain things you can only learn, you know, in that environment, and then there's other things that you can only learn when you're like just, you know, I feel like it's a spiritual journey, you know, and that's what I'm committed to as a musician. You know, I don't think I'd be doing this if I weren't so deeply called to be doing this. And so the cello, you know, I started to connect with the cello more as a vessel for like this greater kind of artistic vision that you know, I still struggle to see sometimes, but that is a part of what I've grown and what I'm, you know, what I'm developing, and, you know, and and also, you know, that I felt like I started studying cello with Rufus after that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the conversations that I would have with Rufus were about groove, and, you know, Rufus is deep into exploring spirituality and music and kind of transcendental experience through music. And so he kind of introduced me into that idea, and some of those rhythms and how that's, you know, been reflected in particularly West African, you know, rhythmic groove. And just taught me how to replicate some of those sounds on the cello. And you know, I'd started playing guitar when I was 13 years old, and so I already had like some strumming, you know, technique and some finger picking technique. And then I started to kind of apply some of that stuff to the cello, and really listening to a lot of recordings of Haitian music and Louisiana Creole music. I think that the second thing that I can say that has been really helpful for me on my path is I moved to New Orleans from New York in 2010. And I'm, you know, I've always been really interested in history. I think if I wasn't a performer, you know, I'd be doing something with history or ethnomusicology or, you know, ethnography in general. And so, you know, being the history buff that I am, the more I started learning about New Orleans history, the more it kept on kind of pointing me back to Haiti, and really kind of reckoning with the fact that our culture has not, has kind of shut out Haitian influence, you know. And then when you start to look into why that is, you know, I think it's really the threat of an independent Black nation, which most people don't realize that Haiti was the first independent Black nation, and that was such a threat to the world powers that it has basically been, you know, thwarted at every turn for the past 200 years since its inception. Wow. And so, yeah, you know, I think these things kind of converging are such big parts of my inspiration. And I started playing the banjo, thinking that I was going to be playing New Orleans jazz, because I just moved to New Orleans and I started playing tenor banjo. The banjo that I play has the same strings as the cello. You should be a banjo player, Mike.
Even I could do.
You would crush tenor banjo. But it is kind of interesting because I'm like, whoa, this is like a little mini cello. It's like nice. I understand the map and I knew how to play chords right away. And so, of course, I had every intention of becoming a trad jazz banjo player. And instead what happened is I discovered this banjo tradition that exists in Haiti. And I traveled to Haiti, you know, in I think 2012 and 2013. And I started, it's like, it was just so meta, you know, because I started researching banjos in Haiti. And then I started seeing banjos everywhere. And I was like, how come I never noticed the banjos before? And that kind of collided with me joining the Carolina Chocolate Drops, which is like the whole theme of that band is the African roots of the banjo. The band literally met at something called the Black Banjo Gathering. And so I just found myself kind of in this world suddenly of like blending music and history and, you know, and also like message, you know, socio-political message. And all of those things feel really important to me. That was my very long-winded answer of how I started playing.
It's so beautiful, Leyla. I mean, it'll be so easy if you have such long answers for each question. You're making my job easy. You know, with that journey, so when did you start singing? Because often, like, socio-political music often is vocal music. And I don't know if singing was something you always did or if that was a decision that you needed to sing in order to do the music that you wanted. But where did the singing, you know, show up on this path?
You know, it's so funny because I think around the time that I started playing, like learning, you know, I taught myself to play guitar with reading guitar tablature, and I was, you know, starting to really nerd out on music and realizing that I wanted to be a musician. When I was 13 or 14, I studied with an incredible cellist, Andrei Emilianov.
I know Andrei, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, which he passed away last year, sadly. So the late great Andrei Emilianov. But I think that was the first time that I really started making music, and I really started making sound that was like, oh, my parents were like, oh, you are good at this. Like, you know, these lessons are going somewhere. So I really got focused on becoming a professional cellist, but at the same time, I had a friend whose mother was a folk singer and guitar player, and she introduced me to guitar tablature. And I was like, oh, there's this way of reading music where it's just like, you use your ear and you figure out where your fingers go on the fingerboard. And I got really into playing guitar that way. And I think around then I was a lot more open to singing and less afraid of my voice. But somehow in the classical kind of indoctrination of my high school and, you know, middle school and high school years, I really decided, no, I'm not a singer, I'm an instrumentalist. And that kind of came undone after I graduated from college. I had started something called the Langston Hughes Project, which was a collective of musicians that were helping me to actualize compositions that I had written to Langston Hughes's poetry. And I've always been very kind of specific about how I want things to sound. So I really annoyed the vocalists in the project, actually. And they basically said, well, why don't you try singing it?
Yeah.
And that's how I started singing again.
Okay.
And I just remember at first being really afraid of the sound of my own voice. Like, it's just the most vulnerable thing. And then I started to realize that that was like really the key to like me kind of coming into my power as a musician, you know, that it's just another tool. And that, you know, your voice is just like, it just sounds like you know, and no one can kind of take that away from you. And so it's really become a seat of power and expression for me that I never thought was going to be part of my path, really. I always thought I'll be, you know, I wanted to be in a string quartet. That was my goal.
Yeah. All the cool cellists do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, and maybe I'll get to do that one day still, but you know, that was my goal before I realized, oh my God, there's all this history that I have to confront, you know, that is within myself, and that the world needs to confront. And so it's, you know, as difficult as the past couple of years has been with this never-ending pandemic, and just the constant feeling like in the washing machine of all that, I feel like we've had some of the most powerful social reckonings and conversations that are taking place now, that I couldn't have dreamed of when I was in high school,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and just wanting to be a classical cellist and
Yeah.
conform. And then once I realized I didn't have to conform to anything, it was like, great. Now I can, explore music that I really love, that,
Yeah.
I don't have to like be a master of anything, I can
Mm-hmm.
just be a master of my own creativity. And that appealed to me, especially, after you graduate from college and you're like, wait a minute, nobody is looking for a cello player in their orchestra, or those spots are already filled by,
Yeah.
whoever. Just like, yeah, I just realized that it takes a lot of creativity to also just build a career. Um, and so I think that I started to think maybe I'm a composer, and that kind of helped lead me to my voice. And I remember I applied to I think I applied to the New England Conservatory, and I was put on the wait list. And I remember
Hmm.
being crushed by that. Like, I was like, they don't want me. And I remember the person who was kind of helping me with the application process said, there's so many ways to be a musician, and there's so many things. And now I think to myself, man, if I had been accepted into that program, I would have gone and had a completely different musical
Yeah.
path. And so I just feel gratitude for the journey.
Yeah. What's interesting, I mean, you have this influence of Haitian and New Orleans cultures, you're singing in Creole, but like your own personal story is like this combination of languages, right? Of the classical, access point, but then the guitar tab access point, and then just diving into your own roots. It's like I mean, I think that's what a lot of people are drawn to with your music, which is that your personal language is unique to you, right? And like there's no such thing as competition or comparison when you're exploring, your own personal voice and your own story. And so I mean that's cool. Is what's special is that you didn't leave things, you just added things, right? You kept the cello on the journey, but you also added all of these other elements, in and of them, in their own terms, in a way.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
kind of makes me think of, like, when I was teaching cello lessons and parents would say, my kid doesn't want to practice their cello. They just want to play the guitar. They just want to play the piano. Or they just want to sing. And I'm like, let them,
Right.
let them,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's what's going to lead them back to the cello anyway.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's, let them find what they want. And I think that we're starting to realize that about, having a holistic musical education is not just what's on the page and, who gets first chair in orchestra.
Hmm.
It's really about, music as a healing mechanism and a form of expression. And, I mean, everyone, so many people think they can't play music, but I think it's because they just don't feel that there's access points to where they want to
Hmm.
go with any of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I never really thought of those junctures as access points, but I think that's totally the right way to think about it.
Mm. As so you're out of school, you're developing your own voice, you get opportunities to play in Carolina Chocolate Drops. I actually saw you play with them at New Orleans Jazz Fest a long time. It was the first time I saw the band, and I think you. I'm not sure how long you had been in it at the time, but I was at the show with my friend Arun Ramamurthy, and he
Oh
was saying
yeah.
he's like, "Oh, I know that cellist." I was like, "Who's this cellist? Like, how do you know her?" I don't know her, and I think you had
Yeah.
just moved to New Orleans, maybe. And so yeah, so now suddenly you're like in the cauldron of American folk music. You're like exploring this specific underserved element of the African influence in American folk music, and then now you're collaborating with Rhiannon in Our Native Daughters with what, Allison and Amethyst, the four of you,
Hmm.
and so I guess I'm curious because the balance of collaborative work and solo work is constantly shifting for different people, right? And so how do these band experiences start to then transform your own solo voice? And over the years, how have those projects influenced your journey as a solo artist too?
Yeah, good question. So, when I left New York City, to it was to play on the street in New Orleans, because I knew I would be able to make money playing Bach on Royal Street. And that's what I did. And it was the first time in my life that I was making money exclusively from playing music.
Awesome.
And that was so incredibly empowering for me. And, certainly not a very unorthodox path. But it changed my life. That year of just being able to focus on practicing my cello, I hadn't been like that since, when I was in college. And so it kind of like having that stability of like, this is my job. I get on my bicycle and go set up my
You
thing.
have
And
somewhere to show up to, yeah.
Yeah, and I play, what I know, which is like every cellist knows Bach, is how I met the Carolina Chocolate Drops. Their manager approached me in the street and basically asked me if I had met Sabine McCalla, who's my sister, who's also a musician. And I was like, of course I know Sabine McCalla. I've known her my entire life. She's my little sister. She had gone to a Carolina Chocolate Drop show and told him the coordinates of where I would be on the street. And so when he approached me, he already had this idea that they were looking to replace someone in the band. There was a lot of change in the band. And so I ended up, just a few months later, I was at Rhiannon's house and we were kind of connecting musically. And then a few months after that, I was in Buddy Miller's studio. I mean, entirely green on any scene, or any names in the Americana world. I just had no idea really what I was getting into, but I knew that it was going to be good and worth it. And I had started getting more into playing old time music. And so I kind of knew what old time music was. But I think at that point really thought of that music as like white people's music, And so being part of the Carolina Chocolate Drops was just such an incredible education in the roots of American music. Mm-hmm. And that's been something. And it also allowed me to really steep my Langston Hughes songs, to refine my vocal, techniques, to decide on arrangements for my songs for my solo record. And to really know what it's like to be on tour and to be a working touring musician, which always felt like the goal. And then all of a sudden I was doing it, and it was like, wait a minute, this is the goal. And then I realized, there was kind of a point of, okay, there's personnel changes in the band again. And I kind of just had the sense of, if I don't do it now, I'd rather fail now than fail later. I mean, you're going to fail no matter what, but in my head, I just thought I'd rather know if I could hack it as a solo artist. And that's when I decided to leave the band. And I had done a Kickstarter. I made a recording with that. And that kind of gave me, that experience really gave me the wings and the financial stability, because I feel like as a musician, especially when you're first starting out, that's such a hard thing, and there's still people that just go on tour and they come back completely not making any money, but they, it's a labor of love and it's a calling. And so I'm just so, that the Carolina Chocolate Drops experience really gave me wings to, really legitimized me, in being able to like find a label for my album and, get a team behind the solo work that I was developing. And, it wouldn't have happened that way. It wouldn't have happened that fast, I think being part of the Chocolate Drops really accelerated the business side of things and also creatively, because having these conversations, sharing books that people are reading on the road, listening to music in the van together. I mean, all of that is kind of educational, you know, it's all learning, it's all
Yeah.
sharing and learning. And that's the thing that I love about music too. And so it
Yeah.
kind of, you know, made me realize, okay, I do want to do this with my life. And what would it look like if I did it in this way? And then, you know, Rhiannon and I have done touring together throughout the years, even as we have been developing our solo careers and putting out work, you know, more under our names. And when she asked me to be part of this project, we didn't know that we were going to be a band called Our Native Daughters. We just thought we were doing a project about the banjo where we were writing songs together about, you know, Black women's experiences and, you know, having meaningful, powerful conversations about slavery and the role of Black women. And wow, how cool is it that we all play the banjo? How did we even come to play the banjo in this, you know, white supremacist society that tells us that we're not meant to be banjo players, you know? So we just had, there's just so many points of contact, you know, and so many connections that we already had. You know, it's just different when you walk into a room and you don't have to explain who you are all the time and how you think about things, or you know, what that experience was like for you, if you know what I mean. And we just, you know, that album was really about camaraderie and about helping Rhiannon to conceive of a vision that she had for making this record with us. You know, we didn't know that it was gonna suddenly be like marketed as this like super group. And we didn't know that people were gonna even listen to the record. Like, we just thought, okay, like, I mean, it's funny, you know, to look at now, but we just thought, okay, well, Smithsonian is excited about this concept and, you know, they're going to put it out and then we'll do a tour. We did one tour. We've literally only done one tour because all of our other tours have been canceled from COVID.
Yeah.
And so it's been a lot of like, you know, a comedy of errors for sure. Happy accidents, but I kind of feel like that's, you know, the essence of my life has been a lot of happy accidents in that way. And I think that, you know, having that bond and that camaraderie and that connection makes me feel inspired. It makes me feel stronger in what I'm doing. It feels like, you know, it's all very supportive and empowering to have that as a part of my network, you know, my community, my kind of well of inspiration is expanded by all of these projects. You know, every collaboration I think is really meaningful in that way. And so, yeah, I feel like they feed each other.
Yeah. It's funny what you said about how, you know, you're learning, you know, with Carolina Chocolate Drops, you're getting book recommendations and whatnot. I've just begun to work more with Rhiannon Giddens through Silkroad, where she's now the artistic director. And I was realizing the other day that I think I've ended up buying a new book on Amazon almost after every single meeting I've been a part of with her, because she's
right.
It's that beautiful like folk old time commitment to like not just knowing the tunes but where they come from, and just like the line between performer and, like as you were saying, like, you know, ethnomusicologist is not, there is no line, right? It's like the source of the music is as meaningful and important as the music itself, and how can that become explicit in our work as an artist?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, in my heart, regardless of what my music is gonna sound like, I feel like I'm always gonna be an old folkie that's researching songs and stories. You know, that's what I'm really drawn to. And I found, like, you know, just the things that I already kind of had in me were really validated by all of these collaborations that I've been a part of, you know? And so that's been really special. And is something that I, you know, still look for in my collaborations and
Yeah.
still look for in my life.
Leyla, would you be up for singing us another song? I see what I think is a cello in the corner of the frame. Would you be up for singing something with the cello for us?
Sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. Man, what should I sing? I thought about singing. There's a song that I really like to play called the Jogo Plombo. It's a Cajun song.
Okay.
But it's another song in Cajun French. And I learned it from a fiddler named Kenray Fontenot. And I wish I could play cello with that. I've been playing cello with some Cajun friends of mine, and it's been really fun because, you know, cello is like just so rare in that tradition. It's all fiddle, accordion, you know, triangle.
Right.
Sometimes banjo, but you know, even that's pretty rare. But I find this one really sits well with the cello. So the Jogo Plombo is a jug of whiskey, and the person in the song is saying, "I've cried and I've prayed just to see your pretty face. It hurts me so much that we can't be together. If we can't get along, you can thank your mother. If I never see you again, you can thank your father." So it's a drinking song and a breakup song.
Awesome.
J'ai roulé les chemins, j'ai pleuré, j'ai prié avec une jogo plombo. C'était pour moi ta chère figure. Oh, dis-moi, toi tu me fais la peine. On a eu pour se séparer, c'était la cause à tes parents. Si on était si mal d'accord, c'est la cause à ta maman. Si on a eu pour se séparer, tu peux m'essayer à ton papa. J'ai roulé les chemins, j'ai pleuré, j'ai prié avec une jogo plombo. C'était pour voir ta chère figure. Si on était si mal d'accord, c'est la cause à ta maman. Si on a eu pour se séparer, tu peux me dire à ton papa.
Yeah. Very nice. Thank you, Leyla.
Yeah, thanks.
You know, we've got some questions I've found here in the Q&A from some of our attendees, and this could be a great time if anybody still has a question that they want to put in there, to do it now, and we'll try and get to all the good ones in the time that we have left. So actually, somebody just put in a question that is actually interesting enough to jump on. So anonymous attendee says, the painting behind you is stunning. Is there a story behind it?
My mother gave me this painting. It's a Haitian painting. I can't make out the name of the painter, but my mother gave me this painting years ago, and it's just been following me everywhere. And it's been in all of my live streams. I have that woman. It's a woman, presumably in Haiti, holding a bucket of water on her head, and it says, "Bouquet de l'eau, un gourd." Bucket of water, one gourd, one Haitian gourd.
That's a good price.
My kids look at that. I have 3-year-old twins.
Mm.
My 3-year-old son Zayd looks at it and he says, "That's Mama." And like everyone that comes to my house thinks it looks like me, so it's been pretty funny.
Yeah, but you actually have like an even larger painting of yourself off camera, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right.
Somebody else. Oh, another anonymous attendee was asking, back to your work about, you're talking about banjo. Have you had a chance to work specifically with West African banjo players? And is there like a difference in their approach from what evolved in America that you encountered?
I haven't had a chance to work with West African players outside of when I lived in West Africa. I lived in Ghana.
That's right. I want to hear more about that too.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, both my parents have been involved in human rights activism my entire life. And when I was in high school, my mother got a job working for a nonprofit organization, working with refugees from Sierra Leone and Liberia. So my family relocated to Ghana in West Africa. And it was there that I encountered some Ngoni players, and I learned about the one-string fiddle, the gonji.
Nice.
And I also, just heard a lot more West African music. And, at the time I had no idea. I wasn't thinking about, banjos and West African string tradition and how it could all be related, to American history. But I did take some lessons, and it's so crazy because I can't even remember the name of the instrument, but I took some lessons at the University of Ghana. I went back in 2006 for a month to visit my mother. And I took some lessons on a lute-like instrument that had 8 strings that's actually very much like the Ngoni, but was a lot smaller. And played in a very similar style, with the thumbs kind of technique. It's funny because I love that music so much. I mean, when I heard actually that you were playing with a kora player.
Tunde.
Yeah. Or ballet Sissoko balafon player.
So the project that Brian mentioned is Bala Koyate, who plays balafon.
Yeah. And I love that music so much. And what I will say is that actually there's an incredible book by this woman, Dr. Jacqueline, forget the last name, but if you Google fiddling in West Africa.
Okay. This sounds like something I should have Googled already, but
if you Google fiddling in West Africa, there's an ethnomusicologist that has done all this research about fiddle playing in West Africa. And I listened to that album and I just want to play that music. I love Moroccan music. I bought a sentir when I was in Morocco 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm deeply fascinated by West African music in particular. And I feel it is so connected to Haitian music. My most recent project, I've been doing a lot of work around understanding Haitian voodoo rhythms that come from Benin. A lot of them come from Dahomey and Benin, some from Congo. And, I'm just, you know, what I hear from like that fiddling in West Africa, especially when it's like a gonji player, like one string fiddle and like ingoni or something. It's like, it's so crazy how it sounds like really, 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 really old time American music that no one's ever heard, you know, like it's kind of amazing.
That's cool.
And so I feel that there's like a natural influence that you can hear when you're listening to some of that music, especially if you just hear one person playing, you know, on their own. But somewhere along the way, the instrument evolved, you know, and the technique evolved.
Yeah.
And of course, there's this whole story about cultural appropriation, and so there's a lot to unravel there. But yeah, I mean, I would love to play with a kora player, Ngoni. Ngoni has been like my dream, you know, and that's kind of Rufus's world too. Rufus is my cello guru, so I always talk about him.
Awesome. That's great.
But yeah, he's played with a lot of West African musicians, and I mean, he's like sending me videos about his trip in Niger where he was, you know, initiated in voodoo, and
wow.
It's pretty deep and incredible, that music, and I would love the opportunity to be able to explore it more.
Yeah. When you were getting deeper into Haitian music, like did you grow up speaking that language, or at what point did you cross the language barrier?
You know, it's so funny because I have had, you know, I was born in New York, visited Haiti many times in my life, you know, a lot of Haitian diaspora don't necessarily get to go back to Haiti and spend time. And so I feel really lucky in that I've been able to spend chunks of my life there that I can remember things. I grew up with a lot of people speaking Creole around me, and I could always understand it. But really, I started learning the language more concretely through the songs.
Yeah.
And, you know, things have been tumultuous in Haiti. I have been busy with my career. I've been growing babies and having babies and raising a family. And so, I have a lot on my plate, and Haiti has had a lot on her plate, and I haven't been able to go and spend the kind of time that I really feel like I need to be able to speak Creole.
I see.
Yeah, but I understand a lot. And yeah, and
I mean, through the songs, you know, you're getting to know the you know, vocabulary and structure of it already in a lot of ways, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And also, you know, thinking about, it's so funny because when I actually went to Haiti, I was interviewed by someone, a young Haitian guy, which was so cool because usually I'm getting interviewed by people who like don't know anything about Haiti. So it was just, it's just a completely different energy, you know? But the guy was saying to me, you know, your accent, it's like my grandmother who is from Cape Haitian. And then I realized that the style of music that I've been most invested in comes from Cape Haitian. And I'm hearing the accents in the recordings without even knowing it, and then singing in that accent. And to me, I'm just like, you know, I feel like I'm just singing in Creole, but I don't know, I can't hear the nuances and the different accents.
Right, like even your access point is potentially like one element of a larger diaspora of music for Haiti.
Right. And so yeah, it's like I think that was a moment for me that I was like, I need to learn so much more, you know. And I feel like experiential kind of like survival mode is the best way to really learn, but that takes time, you know. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm kind of questioning, you know, how do I carve out that time? Yeah. So it's something that I really want to do. It's something I'm passionate about, and I'll figure it out. And I also really want to bring my kids to Haiti because I want them to know Haiti.
Yeah, that's great. The only Haitian song I've learned is Feo, And I know you have like I listened to your recording a bunch as I was trying to learn it. Um, I think that's one of the more well-known songs to people who have no direct connection to Haiti. Like as I was researching it, like there's all these great Paul Simon covers. Like it's a nice like folk
Right.
revival song. Do you have any context on that song? Because that might be an access point for other people who are new to this song. Like where in the island does that come from? And apart, it seems like it's about like a voodoo doctor, but
Yeah.
beyond the explicit lyrics, I don't know much about it.
So, I don't know the style of music that I was really drawn to in like getting to know Haitian music is a style of music called troubadour. And traditionally it's banjo, cha-cha, which is like kind of the maracas, but they're played in a very particular style, and tambour, which is a Haitian drum, like a basic Haitian drum. There's lots of different types of tambour, but that's the band, and it's a secular style of music that is played all over Haiti, but it seems to come from the north. Cape Haitian is the northern, the major city, and so I can't say definitively I know where that song comes from, but it is a voodoo song, and I learned it from a troubadour singer named Tikoka. There's a band called Tikoka and Wanga Nejes, which means the nightingales. And this guy is called Tikoka because he's kind of slim and has a small figure. So people in Haiti said he resembles like a small Coca-Cola bottle. So that's how he got this name. Okay. And it's pretty funny, just the Haitian sense of humor. But he had a beautiful recording and I fell in love with the song. And that's really why I wanted to play the song. But then I found like Simon and Garfunkel did a version, and that kind of cracked me up. And yeah, it seems like a lot of people know that song. I mean, you could find I think I found like a German boys choir sang that song.
I want to hear that.
How is this song so captivating to people? But the song is saying, fey means leaves, when it's talking about herbs. Save my life, my baby's sick, and it says mapkui kai gangan, which means the gangan is referring to the hugan, who's the spiritual leader in the voodoo religion. And Sili bon gangan, if he's a good gangan, then he'll save my life. And I just remember listening to the Tikoka version, and it was really stripped down, and there was a lot of call and response in the vocals, and it was really joyful, but it was also like this, earnest cry for help, and that felt like, that's real.
Pretty universal, the feeling, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's great. Let me think. I'm going to look for some other questions because I know we've got some good ones. Somebody was wanting to just follow up. Like, what was your original connection to Langston Hughes poetry?
So my connection to it was, like many kids in the United States, you learn about the Harlem Renaissance, and they focus on Langston Hughes for 90% of that, and maybe Duke Ellington for another 5%. And I just remember really enjoying. I think that was one of the first times that I was like, oh, I get poetry. I like poetry, And then years later, my dad bought me a book when I was 16 years old for my birthday. That was the selected poems of Langston Hughes. And, I was starting to be like a angsty kind of iconoclast teenager. And I thought, I'm going to get deep into poetry. And I loved that book. And then years later, when I was like, am I a songwriter? Am I a composer? I feel like I have those kinds of inclinations, but I was kind of like, I just want to, focus on being a good cello player, but I couldn't stop myself from thinking that maybe I should, try setting some of these poems to music. And then I started doing that just because I was like, I have like needs to express myself creatively. And so much of, around that time, it was like so much of what was happening in the world felt like it corresponded perfectly to these poems. And so much of what was happening for me internally, just trying to find my path and trying to navigate my identity and, trying to understand what human rights are, and things like that. Kind of so many of Langston Hughes's poems really kind of encapsulated that in really gentle and simple ways that I felt, could be given a second life. And then, of course, at the time, I didn't realize like people have been setting Langston Hughes's poems to music, like since he's been writing them. I just thought, wow, what a great idea. Oh, this has been done before, but it's still good. That's still
the sign that it is a great idea, is that you're not the only one who had it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's the folk process.
Yeah, right.
That's what I have a friend that calls that the folk process. It's like, do what someone else did and then do it in a different way.
Yeah. Nice.
But I just like, so many of those songs like just still resonate with me. I re-released the album last year through Smithsonian Folkways, and it was just incredible, with all the Black Lives Matter protests and, this kind of elevated social conversation. I just made me feel like, wow, these words are just as relevant as when I felt them when I was 16 years old. And, when he wrote them in 1927 or, 1933. And, I also have read Langston Hughes's autobiographies, and Langston Hughes actually also helped connect me with my Haitian roots, because that was the first time that he had traveled outside of the United States. He went to Haiti. He spent time with another poet and writer named Jacques Roumain, who wrote a beautiful book called The Masters of the Dew, or if you want to read it in French, La Gouverneur de la Rosée. And I was just blown away when I read Masters of the Dew. Langston Hughes is one of the translators, and he talks about that experience of being in Haiti and feeling, what it was like to be a Black person in a Black place, as opposed to the United States, where, it was always like the other, and just kind of that the veil of that lifting was just so powerful to me, because I had felt that, when I lived in West Africa. I had felt that when I was in Haiti. And, that experience was just so helpful for me in understanding, who I want to be in this world, and how to talk about these things.
Yeah.
I talk a lot.
Well, it's a good thing we had an interview to feature you.
I guess that's why.
Yeah.
How I got here.
Yeah, this is so great. Thank you, Leyla, for taking the time to speak with me and answer some of these questions. I know there's even like more questions potentially, but I'm sure people could, contact you through social media or whatnot and connect further.
Absolutely.
But I just want to thank Brian and Gabby for giving me the enviable opportunity to have an hour to chat with you, Leyla. It's really great to meet you this way.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you too.
Yeah, and I hope we get more chances to talk, and that everybody here can now listen to your music afresh, understanding all the more where it sits in your story.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
you. Thank you both so much, Mike and Leyla. This was, to use your words, Leyla, it was an elevated social and musical conversation, and we cannot thank you enough for that. There has been a lot of love coming at both of you in our Q&A box, and we will make sure to share all of the links and as many book recommendations in our follow-up email tomorrow, so that you can, read up on all the things that were just discussed. And I want to thank you again for joining us. For some of you, it was quite early or quite late in the evening. Thank you for being with us. Please stay in touch. Go to worldmusicinstitute.org. And thanks again, Mike and Leyla, for a wonderful conversation and an at-home experience. And
Yeah.
make sure, if you're in the New York City area, to come out to live shows again. We are so excited to be able to presenting them again. And Mike will be on a New York stage through World Music Institute. So please come and stay in touch and have a good rest of the day, evening, morning, whatever it may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Leyla. Thank you, Brian.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.